G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 6 of True Blue Conversations with your host Adam Bloom, the author of Easy Target, now available at adambloom.com.au. 8 years ago, after returning from 3 tours of Afghanistan and then gaining experience and education in financial planning, Warren Loudon teamed up with fellow veteran Dave Vaughan and started Loudon & Vaughan Private Wealth, founded with the underlying belief that every person matters and every dollar counts, providing comprehensive tailored financial advice and wealth management services for you and your family. Loudon & Vaughan will guide you towards your financial goals with integrity and transparency. Whether you're planning for retirement, investing for the future, or managing your family's wealth, they've got you covered. Visit loudonandvaughan.com.au or call 02 9538 2704 to book a meeting with Warren today.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today, this is a very, very special podcast. I'm coming to you live from Nowra. I can't believe I am sitting in this man's presence. This man is an icon around the world. He is the oldest living Victoria Cross recipient in the world and the last Australian to receive the Victoria Cross under the imperial system before we moved away from the imperial system. Today, I'm joined by Keith Payne VC AM. I am recording his story, and we have a very special guest joining both Keith and I, Rick Meehan from the Keith Payne Benefit Group, as Keith is hard of hearing sometimes, and Rick will be in the background to help Keith understand the question and repeat it if it's needed. So if you hear Rick's voice, that is the reason. Keith Payne, VC AM, welcome to the show.
Well, I thank you very much for selecting me to do the honours. And I'd like to say a good morning or good evening to all your listeners.
Thank you. And Keith, before we get into your career, can we go back to a young Keith and tell me about life growing up when you were a young boy before you joined the military?
Well, that was an extensive period in the young people's lives in North Queensland. Basically, I was born in 1933. War broke out in the Middle East in 1939 against Hitler, and then of course it busted again with the Japanese in 1941. By then I was around the 9 and 10 years of age. My elder sisters were in their early teens, and the rest of the family was yet to come. So living during the war years in North Queensland, and I'd like to explain to the public that one of the things that made it very awkward was when General MacArthur came to Queensland, and he had a look at the tactical arrangements of the Bruce Highway, the railway and everything, and found out that he could no longer sustain and have heavy machinery, tanks and everything going north because there was the bridges and roads and everything wouldn't carry them. So he donated then the Brisbane line. On forming what was known as the tactical Brisbane line during the Second World War, a lot of the people in the north fled south because the Japanese had now come into Papua New Guinea, and we were on the Kokoda Trail and a few other close areas, and there was supposedly a bomb dropped on Townsville, which we query because it could have been the Allies dropping that, and it landed right out in the mud flats in Palaranda, and it was probably a thing, could have been a thing for the government to raise for war bonds that were on sale in those days. My father, of course, like everybody else, enlisted and went away in uniform for the country. That left the home to be run by the younger generation and the towns to be run by the younger generation. At 11 years of age, I was working, picking potatoes and things in a grocery shop and bagging them into 7-pound boxes and what have you, delivering milk, delivering bread, you name it, the younger generation had to do it because there was no menfolk to do it. It was a time of great importance for the younger generation. Schooling became a very secondary thing to the people in the north. We had trenches dug and we had air raid warnings and everything else like that when we did attend school. But other than that, we were fossicking and living and keeping the families alive, not only at home but also as neighbours that didn't have children and what have you, to look after the smaller items that had to happen. So being brought up in a situation like that, prior to enlisting into firstly the regimental cadets, when it started after the Second World War with the CMF, and we went into training. And those days, people, you better believe, I was then 14, and we were carrying full military equipment, including our rifles and bayonets and everything, home with us and carrying, because we didn't know what the situation was in the world at the time. But however, we all came out of the war, I think, basically educated to looking after a community that had within itself a very hard period. I mentioned about the Bruce Highway and the singular rail track and the bridges and roads that weren't accessible throughout the year. It was also at this time that the people who wished to travel south to visit the soldiers who'd come home on leave and were encamped in the Brisbane area and everything, but weren't allowed to come north, the families had to go down and see them. So what occurred here was that the trains used to go down, and the singular line going north, right, was to carry the troop trains, had the access to the whole system. So any other train, goods trains, etc., and passengers used to go onto the station loop and probably sit there all day or 2 days before the traffic for the military had gone through the station and what have you. So there was a big hold-up of people going south and people coming north, and the vegetation and everything that we were getting in the north for the soldiers in the north as well as the population was going rotten, and it wasn't a very nice period to be tied up in things like that. However, the government came out with the order that each house had to have its own victory garden, and we, as the young boys of the family, had to do the shovelings and the picketings and the growings and what have you. And we also done a lot of fishing and everything that helped to feed the family as well as neighbours. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of what was happening during the Second World War and what it was like to be a young person brought up at that time.
Yeah, definitely. You did your CMF training, and then in 1951 you joined the Australian Army. And talk me through that process when you joined in 1951.
It comes 1951 when I went to enlist in the Australian Regular Army. I'd been through, and I'd just turned 17, and I enlisted into the CMF almost at the same time as I was going into the Regular Army. And I had an experience prior to coming to. I had to wait until the very first of 1950 when I turned 16 and I could take over the apprenticeship with a furniture company for doing cabinet making and joining. And prior to that, I was cutting cane, and we finished cutting cane, and to do something else over the Christmas period was to finish off the cane harvesting, which finishes earlier in the year now because of the harvesters and what have you. But before I could take up my apprenticeship. I took up my apprenticeship with the cabinet maker, which is an Italian company. The old man was a decent, bloody good old bloke. His son, who was taken in during the Second World War, he was put into the army and he was made an interpreter, and he was posted down in the Melbourne area, and he was looking after and doing the interpreting for the internment camp in Victoria. After the war, when he came home and the Italian prisoners, and I must say I disagree with them being imprisoned, were allowed home again to the cane paddocks and what have you, the young fellow that was their interpreter took over some of the business in the shop, and he was virtually acting as the sales representative, and because of association with the Italians in prison and everything, and he was outside and he wasn't getting much business. So it was my responsibility, given by his father, to go with him and help do the selling for the shop. So those sort of things that come with you when you're young, following on from the activities of during the war, make a big difference in your life. You're going from one campaign sort of thing to another, and it was fulfilling until such times I had slight altercations with the young bloke and punched him out, and he sacked me. Well, what occurred was I was called up for the military, and I went down to Brisbane, and they said, "Oh, well, your apprenticeship hasn't been cancelled," and so I had to go back to Ingham, right? And he said, "You couldn't leave, I got you back," and all the rest of it. And now we had a slight altercation. I slocked him off the bloody loading ramp and a few other little things, and he said, "You're sacked." And I said, "Wasn't it damn hell, didn't you do that before?" You know. So that was my entrance into the regular army. I went straight back to Brisbane, went into recruit training, went into battle training down in Puckapunyal before being posted overseas to Japan initially to do finalised training and administration before going into Korea.
And for you, being so young, what was your training like when you went down and actually joined the army? What was it? A bit of a shock, or were you could handle the toughness of
the first part of the training, the recruit training, was a breeze through because I'd had the introduction in the regimental cadets and the CMF, and so the recruit training part of it was just a secondary brush on.
Mm-hmm.
The follow-on, though, was an entirely different sequence. Battle inoculation and everything was full on with live fire weapons and I'm not going to go into the great big details, but however there were a number of casualties during the battle training prior to leaving Australia for battle. I think some of it was worse than what we had in Korea, but however, it has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be initiated to that conditioning, to understand it, and be able to fulfill the role that you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So generally people, the military is no little circuit. It's quite a full-on organisation, and having stayed in it for over 27 years and everything, it became a home. And what I learnt, I instructed on from officer training units, national service officer training units and everything. So my career was built around the initial days and everything, and I was quite happy in doing what I was doing.
And when you went to Japan, were they still recovering from the end of World War II when you went to Japan?
Oh yeah. I had the opportunity to go into Nagasaki. I didn't go into Kure, where the atomic explosions took place, and it was terrible. Terrible to see some of the burnt people that were still alive, but the whole lot of the city was just blown out. It was something that people can tell you about, but you can't visualise it. Mm-hmm. It's something that's bloody terrible. Bloody terrible. And I don't blame the Japanese for surrendering once those two bombs were exploded, one at Kure and one at Nagasaki. That was terrible.
And for you, that would have been a shock, but as you know, with the rest of your career, there was a bit more to come. And talk me through your first trip to Korea and your first deployment to Korea, and what do you remember of your time in Korea?
The Korean campaign at this time of my arrival had settled down into a stabilised front line, and the enemy had their line and we had our line. The up and down of the country had stopped because of the increase in military personnel taking part in the campaign, mainly American. And once, my old mate MacArthur put in the landing at Incheon and captured a lot of the North Korean and Chinese people. A lot of people don't know that it was Chinese were involved in it, and the Russians. But from my point of view, we went straight up, and I went straight into the line. I was posted into the 1st Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment in the B Company, and I had a good company commander, Major Joe Mann, an old wartime fellow, and he commanded the company really well, and the leadership down the line, except for one occasion, was damn good. But on that one occasion, he was not my friend. He was not the friend of the rest of the diggers, and he was moved. He was moved, all right. I won't explain how he was moved, why he was moved, but there was a bit of a fiasco, and it all happened. The time in the line was basically out into the valley patrolling. A couple of reconnaissance patrols up onto the enemy position, and to keeping very much like rats under the ground to keep warm in the winter. The winter is bitter. The reason that a lot of young soldiers went, of my age group and slightly older too, mainly the soldiers in the battalion, the soldiers, not the senior NCOs or officers, but the soldiers themselves, were all up to about 25. Prior to that, when the World War had begun and everything, the battalion that was in Japan as the British occupation force went over, and those people were some out of the Second World War, and they were basically older in their 30s and some in their 40s. And they just couldn't stand the cold. They just could not stand the cold, and the army had to shift them. And they said, well, the young people can look after it and they can stand the cold. Well, we stood the cold, but believe me, it was bloody hard. It was bloody hard.
So were you... sorry, Keith.
Yeah, the experience in the line in the first instant was basically looking after the position in defence, fighting patrols down into the valley and engaging the enemy down in the valley, and positioning yourself for anything that the enemy may put forward in the future.
So how long was the deployment to Korea?
12 months.
12 months.
You were supposed to do 12 months. I did about 7.5 months. I think it was about 7.5. I don't think I went into the 8th month before I became a casualty. And I was evacuated then through the medical system, the Indian field MASH, and people have seen the MASH on TV, and the lift out by helicopters and things like that. Those all happened. I had an incident when I was returning to Japan to the hospital. During my recruit training, I had another chap with me, and he was out of the Courier Mail. He was a photographer for the Courier Mail before he enlisted into the army, and he became a POW in our first term into the line. And he came out, he was released as I was coming out injured in the hospital plane to go back to Japan. And although I didn't know it, all the seating in the aircraft was down the side of the aircraft and not the way we have our seating at the moment. And there was a spare canvas seat sitting alongside of me, and who the hell comes aboard? It's bloody Bluey Donnelly. He'd just been reprieved for a while. We'd done our recruit training together. You think, look, a couple of girls crying. We were, mate.
Yeah.
We were. We cuddled each other, and, you know, yeah, it was a very emotional time for both of us to see each other, having been through what we've been through, and he's released out of the PW, but they put him on a plane. He came straight home. I remained in Japan in hospital until such times as they said, well, the bone's not healing, send him home. So I subsequently became a returned veteran at the age of 20.
Wow. And do you think, Keith, from your experiences in Korea, it gave you a good foundation of building resilience for the rest of your life?
Oh, yes. Yeah. One of the most important things, I think, that is to understand your fellow man and understand quickly as you can their capabilities and their non-capabilities and things like that. So you get the best and best result from the soldier, but you get a friendship that lasts forever. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a marvellous thing, the services. It creates a friendship built on the trust of each other looking after each other's life.
Of course, yep. And for you through the services, you met your beautiful wife, Flo, which you still are together today. What was that like, meeting your future wife in the service, in the army?
Once I went back on duty, I was posted to Townsville to the cadet unit, and I had to do a driver max course at trade training. And Flo, who was in the army as well, was at Trade Training Centre doing a clerical course. So a boy meets girl in the 6 weeks we were there, and we become engaged. I went back to Townsville. Flo remained in Brisbane. We communicated by telephone and mail, and Flo came up and met my family in the September, and then we were married in the December. And happily we've lived together and raised a family of 5 boys, and that's 70 years of marriage.
It's a beautiful story and still continues, which is fantastic. And so you're posting for the next few years around, and then in 1968 you deploy to Vietnam. Vietnam War has been going for a little while now. How did that come about, you getting over to Vietnam?
A waiting period. I'd been in Malaya. We were in Malaya. Mm-hmm. And I was carrying out the duties of a platoon commander at the time, and I was doing patrols on the Malay-Thai border and what have you. And then the Indonesians stepped into the business, And I was called down because I was a qualified diver, myself and a corporal. I was the sergeant at the time. Myself and a corporal were called down, and we were put on board British ships. I became the diving supervising officer on the Victorious, and he was put on another ship. And that was to do the ship's clearance and everything, diving. And we done a deep dive, 120 foot, and we done another one at 242 foot. But they done that was called down because we were qualified divers in Australia, right? And that all comes about from parachute training, cliff roping and climbing, small-scale raids from the submarines that we used to do. Mm-hmm. It was all close-knit training that some of us did to marry in with exercises that against the enemy that could happen. Right, so it was a damn fine experience, diving to depths and everything like that, and putting up with the snakes around your bloody neck as well in the straits. But and then from there, of course, was back to the battalion, and as soon as I arrived back in the battalion, it was home, right? Because what was happening at home now was national service had banged in. And I went through the Warrant Officer's Training Course. From there, because I'd been instructing at National Service, the first bracket in National Service, I copped the instructional job again, but the next time was at Skyville for the officers, National Service officers and everything. And that was quite an experience. And from there, things blew up again because Indonesia was playing hooly deets in Papua New Guinea, so I was posted to to New Guinea, and I was doing border patrols along the Ilimanjaro border, and supposed to be the regimental duty warrant officer, but the regimental duty warrant officer went out the window because I become the transport officer for the battalion. Yeah, all of these jobs that you get that you're not supposed to get. But it's nice to get a captain's pay when you're a warrant officer, but it's also, you learn that the rise isn't bloody great, mate, I can tell you, between a captain and a warrant officer. But, and then, of course, straight out of Papua New Guinea into the training team into Vietnam.
So, Keith, as we've been here with Digger Day and yesterday, we remember the life of Dasher Wheatley. And he was killed 60 years ago this year. And can you just give us some memories that you have of your good mate, Dasher Wheatley?
Dasher, I never got to know Dasher really well because I was posted in Brisbane at the time, and Dasher and 1RAR was down to Holsworthy. And like our friendly football games, we all had inter rivalry within the units. And of course, you know, we're very friendly on the football field. And Dasher, in actual fact, tumbled me out on a sideline during one of our games down with the battalion in Ingleburn. And that was my meeting with Dasher until we got off the paddock and got together as football teams do in units in the Australian Military Forces, where we became partners and mates and everything else. But whilst you're on the paddock, it's team to team, and football to football, and watch it, mate, I'm coming in. And Dasher pushed my head down, and he said, sorry, mate. And yeah, he was bloody sorry, all right. And I went, and that was my meeting with Dasher, and I didn't know who it was until after the game, of course, when you're in a convivial area, drinking, having convivial water, and meeting each other like soldiers do. So that was when I met Dasher, and I had time with Dasher and other members of the football field team at that time. And I never ever seen Dasher again. I was sorry to see him go, and there was a lot of sponsorship to get his remains home and everything that the government wasn't doing at the time. So yeah, I was sorry. Then of course I met up with Edna and young George, and that's been a friendship of families over the years.
Beautiful. Thank you, Keith. It's, as you say, we remembered Dasher yesterday, and we remember his service, his sacrifice, and the hard but fair soldier that he was.
Oh, look, to hear the Dasher Wheatley story, carrying out Swanson carry out Swanson, tossing his wage weapon, and the bloody bull that came out of the government because he'd thrown away his weapon. The weapon wasn't a weapon anymore, right? It was out of ammunition. He was carrying somebody, right? All it was a piece of steel and a bit of plastic, right? I threw mine away, right? But it was become useless because it was hit through the magazine area and it wasn't going to work anyhow. So why hang on to something that's not going to work? And you know, when they brought out during the investigation stupid things like Dash with throwing away the weapon, and then the carrying him on his shoulder, and they'd say, well, why didn't he carry him on his hip, and he could have fired his weapon? And you know, people in senior position just either they don't know or they're damn stupid to see what is happening at the time. At the time, he had no alternative. Put the man on his shoulder who was out of ammunition. Why carry the weapon? He had a pistol. He was still armed. He had grenades with him, and he used grenades on the enemy to the end and to his end. And by that time, I believe in what I have read and everything, and I don't question. I believe that Swano had passed, and he was carrying a body. Now, there's a thing here. There's a thing here. Dasher was looking after his mate. He was looking after a soldier, an Australian soldier, a partner in the army, a partner, a friend, and everything. And Swanson was him, and he was not going to let that man's remains being laid out in a bloody paddy field or anything else. he was taking it with him. Right? And that, look, from a soldier's point of view, that's a passionate thing to do, is to make sure that your friend and everything is going to be cared for wherever you can get him. So that's where Dasher. I never knew Dasher in those days, but I can understand the character of Dasher, having met him in society, on the field of battle, in the football field. And you know from your heart's direction that Dasher would have done every damn thing he could, which he did do, including losing his own life for his friend.
Well said, Keith, and I think we owe it to both him and Butch, and we never forget them, and we never forget the 103,000 men and women that have laid down their life for our country, and I think the final words are, lest we forget. Thanks for that, Keith.
Well, firstly, Peter I only met. I never served with Peter in any way. He was transferred out of the artillery into infantry and went on the team early in the piece and was subsequently killed and given his award. Simo, Chutta moment. Chutta. We served together like peas in a pod, running all over the bloody place together, and he got into his big trouble just south, about 3 k's south of where I was, and where he stuck his nose out, silly bugger, and he had the CO of the training team with him at the time. R.D.F. Lloyd was in the rear, and R.D.F. Lloyd said, "Is there anything you want me to do for you, Simo?" And Simo said, "Yes, stay back where you bloody well belong." And so I ended up getting Jock out. Jock got hit, and every time Ray'd try and go forward to get him out, they'd shoot Jock again. And anyhow, the incident was over, and Jock got him. Simo got Jock out, and as a subsequent, he was awarded his Victoria Cross. And that was about a month before my award, the action that I was involved in, which I had a small firefight on my first operation. I had now been appointed as the company commander of Mobile Strike Force. Mobile Strike Force's operational procedure had to be deep penetration behind enemy lines in reconnaissance and what have you, and find out where the enemy were hiding in the jungle and what have you. So I had a small contact, and I found that my soldiers, they weren't putting their ammunition in the right place, unfortunately. They were shooting, but where the ammunition was going, bugger do I know. So I requested and got a week's training cycle for them, and that was a very beneficial thing in 2 ways. It helped teach the soldier to fire his weapon accurately, right, and to not waste his ammunition. The other one was the connection between the soldiers and myself. after that first operation and the training, I suddenly, on the next operation I went out, I had, what's this? And I had 4 soldiers around me, self-appointed bodyguards. I thought, well, I must be on a good foot here. And they want me around the place, and those soldiers stuck with me all the time. By God, they were bloody good. They were very loyal. I wasn't Sir or anything. I was Kit. They couldn't pronounce Keith. Right? I was Kit.
Kit.
And Kit was like Sir. Kit. So we go down, where they go, you know. And it was great. It was great. And they stuck by me, and that's why I had to stick by them. I mean, you know, you do those things. And, yeah, the next operation was a big bloody firefight, we had an area to patrol of the 3 companies within the battalion, and I was centre of the patrol area, and I had one company on the right and I had another company on the left, and the idea was I find they come in and everything. And on the 23rd we went down, there was a bit of a track, and we crossed the creek and bang, I went down. The Sig Long was alongside of me, and I come to, and he was reporting that I'd been hit. And when I came to, I moved forward a bit. The fight had moved about 50 metres in front of me at this stage, so I was watching from the rear what was happening from here to the front of the concrete. You know, it's about 50 metres, I think. Anyhow, I came out of that all right, and we came out of the firefight. I had one wounded, and I had to remain in the situation, and I occupied a small feature, brought in a helicopter. We blew down a bit of jungle. We were carrying C4 and detonators and everything. We blew down a bit of jungle to allow a chopper in, and we put the wounded on it the next morning. And I flew them out, and I said to the forward platoon commander, I said, I want to be on this feature. I pointed to the map. No later than bloody just on after dark, or on dark, right? It's going to be a go. So we went and we got onto that bloody feature, and it just settled in, and the clear and patrol went out, and bang, bang, she started. And it went through, the 20 afternoon of the 24th, all Anzac Day, 25th, 26th, and finished about, the last one was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the 26th. It was at that stage I knew I'd got the feeling and everything that he had withdrawn from the firefight. Right, so I sent the other company down the ridge to clear the ridge and have a look what was going on, because whilst the firefight was on, I was out of range of artillery, right? So I had to bring in the guns, and the guns came in on the afternoon of the 25th. No, the afternoon of the 24th, and I engaged and everything and brought those into operation on the 25th, and it was a closed-in area, and I'd now also, one of the signals I'd sent back to headquarters was that not to send anybody in with enemy ammunition. We were running low, but I got ammunition, half the ammunition of the other company that was behind me, instead of bringing in choppers, because there was 3 heavy machine guns, and I wasn't going to lose a bloody bird for the partial shortage of ammunition. I still had enough to withstand another attack against the company. So once I got half the ammunition from him, we were all right, solid on the ground. But the American sergeant major took it on himself to send in a chopper with ammunition on it. And well, it came in and the bloody machine gun just went, and he went out of the chopper, and the chopper went down about 200 metres away, or no, about 2 k's away. So the fact that I had already told them don't send anybody got me out of the shit. Because they would have been looking for somebody to give the shit to. So once Tolly had taken his company down, they'd cleared it, and there was a lot of blood around the place, and they had bamboo pipe water. They had their own little hospital thing. It was a big training area for the regiment, for the NVA regiment. And it was strange that the following month, on the same bloody dates, I run into him at bayonet. And that's when all the fiasco started. They were trying to take Ben Hett, and there was 3 regiment, one coming straight in from the west off the Ho Chi Minh Trail, one from slightly from the northwest coming around the old French Road, and the other one was coming down from the north. And I engaged this bloody mob that were this mob. And they got the best, because unfortunately, the battalion now got an officer. We got an American lieutenant given to us as the CO. So, under normal circumstances, we just had the 3 company commanders, and the forward company commander, or the company commander that got engaged and everything, become the battlefield commander, right?
Yep.
Right, so, and people can understand that. Well, I was a battlefield commander down at Burgee Map, and now he'd come in and he was taken over, and when we went up onto to take these forward positions away from the enemy, he pissed off. Him and the headquarters fucking pulled out. Montez, the other company commander, got hit badly. He lost all his jaw and everything. My forward platoon commander pissed off with the battalion commander. That left myself and my medic, right, and my 4 security guards. Right, they stayed with me, right, and a couple of other blokes, and we got two wounded coming down, and we were last off the hill. Went back to where we thought there would be an RV, but they'd fucked off. The American fucked off. And he took Jerry and the wounded and everything with him. And they only went about 300 metres and he dropped them. Left them. Went pissed off back to 600. him and my forward platoon commander, who was an SAS, a sergeant, temporary warrant officer. He pissed off with him. I got him out of trouble because I said he was under orders from the American to go back. Otherwise he'd have been court-martialed. So they left Jerry and them, and when we came along, I came along after. I picked up this fucking bunch and had to bring them all the way back. And Montez, I went back as far as I could to, with the idea that I was out of range of the enemy, and I'd be able to get a bird in with a bloody Maguire rig to get him up and get him out. But they had no bloody command bird with a Maguire rig at duck toe. And that bird was down at bloody Ben Head, down at Playcoo, and they got him back. So he had to fly all the way up, but by the time he would have reached it, Montez passed on. And I had to request then to leave the body for later recovery because I had all the other wounded and what have you. So and we ended up getting into the secure position of Hill 600 about 2 o'clock in the morning. So it was, and I was confronted the next day for not reporting to the American that I was in, and if I'd have reported to him, I'd have shot him. I'm sure of that. I was so angry with what had occurred. You know, you don't do that. You don't do that. And he did it. Anyhow, all ended up, and the Americans awarded me a Silver Star for Burgee Map, and I got a Victoria Cross for Ben Head. And from there, I was shifted out of Mobile Strike Force and put into what was an Arvin regiment, but I didn't remain in the Arvin regiment because I was terribly sick at the time. I had a good set of ulcers that you wouldn't bloody believe, and I'd put up with all this bloody nonsense of bloody ulcers because we were living on bamboo and rice, bamboo rats, and little bamboo shooties and everything that I used to cook up. And I don't think it done the figure any good because I must have been about bloody 2 stone lighter than what I am now. And it certainly didn't do my stomach any good. So with that, they took me back to Vaughan Tower, to hospital, and one of my old RSMs was now commissioned, and he was the quartermaster down at the hospital. And it came out in the paper, he's had enough. Australian papers said, he's had enough, bring him home. So they sent me home. But, of course, it was send me home once again to hospital. I was in bloody hospital again. They give me a weekend leave. I landed at Kelvin Grove. They took me, I flew in, and they changed me from the C-130, me and my bloody travelling bag, onto a helicopter and flew me into Kelvin Grove in a chopper and had all the wheels there and everything, and they're all saluting and going on, and my kids are racing over, and I wasn't worried in there. I was home. And this young soldier came over and He said, "Here you are, so here's your leave pass for the weekend."
Oh, really?
I hadn't seen a leave pass for a number of years. Yeah.
So you say, as your citation reads, you say 40 of your men, and there's a famous photo of you and Simo after you'd been told that you had been awarded your Victoria Cross, and you couldn't have a beer because of your ulcers. What was that like, being told that
I
you
drank
were going
that
to get...
bloody beer, mate. Chudda was waiting outside the press room in Saigon when the announcement was made. And when it was over, I got out through the door, and Simo was waiting at the bloody door, and he just bent down like that. And down I here, mate. hit me with the tube. I say, "Simo." Yeah, so needless to say, I didn't go to hospital that day. I went back to the pub. We were staying at the embassy in Saigon, and we'd occupied the top roof, and well, it was a bit of an occasion.
Of course.
Yeah.
And over the years, after you were awarded your Victoria Cross, you formed a very special bond with Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth. What was it like the very first time that you met her and that friendship developed, and the last time that you spoke to her?
When the Queen came out here in 53, I'd just been posted to Townsville at the time. I think it was 53 or 54. Anyhow, I had the position in the hotel with all the PW, all the announcement things, all the, what do they call it?
Media.
Media, right, and the microphones and everything like that, all set up around the bloody place for when she came down. I'd say, well, she came down, and then of course the main military establishment at the time was out at Kissing Point, not out. The army wasn't in Townsville at the time. We had just people out at Kissing Point, and the Brigadier's house was on the top of the hill and everything. And she came out and was greeting around, and I was talking to her then. And her and Philip. And that was the first time I met her. And always, 63 she came out again. 63 was just before I went to Malaya, right? And they put me with the Royal Car Company as the door opener for the Queen. So obviously I had to meet the Queen. Obviously I had to meet the bloody Queen, you know. And there's photos in the Courier Mail and everything, you know, of me opening the door and everything. And then she had a reception in the showground. And Flo and I were there and in the line-up, and she came through and she said hello to us. Said, "Okay, down." And then she went about 2 people along, and she came back and she said to Flo, she said, "Now, Mrs. Payne, you won't forget you're coming on board for lunch tomorrow, will you?" So we had lunch with her the next day on the Britannia. And, you know, over the years, going to England and everything, it was, it was a very good friendship. I didn't get along too well with Philip, he wanted to beat the arse up, I think, a bit, whereas the Queen was more, she was conservative but approachable and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he was a bit of a both. And then, of course, I had met Charles. We had a function at Manson House where the Queen Mother was residing. The Queen Mother was the mentor for the association, and she held a morning tea for us, and young Charles was there, and we met him, but he was about 16, I think, 16 or 17, something like that. And then he met and then stood back and said nothing, but we took no notice of him after a while. Anyhow, we had, the Queen Mum had Vera Lynn entertaining us, and of course Vera sang all the old wartime songs and everything, and that was great. It was really great. After that, I had many meetings with the Queen, and it was a good friendship, a good relationship. Just me, the humble servant, being able to speak to her, and we discussed all sorts of things at once. I didn't even go around to the bloody garden. But that's all right. It's still conversing, doesn't matter what it is.
Of course. And do you think, Keith, from your time in Malaya, Borneo, that really gave you a great foundation for your time in Vietnam?
Yes, yeah. I personally think that all of the battalions should have gone through Malaya and the jungle and everything prior to going into Vietnam. It was the final training ground, if you like. You knew you had an enemy, right? But you knew that he wasn't very active. But on the same token, you knew he was there, right?
Yep.
So your patrolling and everything became very, very conscious, not like patrolling in the jungle in Innisfail or somewhere, or at Canungra. This has got a little bit of a reason behind it here.
Yep.
So. Yeah, I think that they done it. I think they were sending the young National Service officers there for about 3 months before they went into Vietnam.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure of that, but that could have happened.
So you're awarded your Victoria Cross, your Silver Star, and a lot of people might not know this, but you served in Oman. And what was your time like in Oman?
That was tied down with the British. Oman was a British protectorate. And, of course, it was before all the oil and everything came in Oman itself. And the ADU, under the arrangements of the USSR, were trying to take over the canal for the shipping, to stop the shipping going through and making it go right around Africa and what have you. And whilst people don't realise what was happening there was the British were bombing in the southern part of Oman around that way to stop the ADU. And The British SAS took out a main position behind Muscat itself, the city itself. So, and then I arrived after that, and they then had formed the Damavan line. And I had a company of Omani soldiers. I like these Indigenous soldiers, right? Omani soldiers are out in the end of the Hornbeam line in a position called Oven, and it was an oven. It was like bloody Sir Lawrence Arabia, Shamal, and that's gear that's just not put on for fun or anything. It's practical. That's why they wear it.
Yeah, right.
You know? And so I was once again a company commander on the position called Oven, out on the Hornbeam line and out on the end. And one of the things that I achieved that is little known, we had an outpost about 20 feet off the bottom of the wadi, right, up on the cliff side, and we were on top of the hill, right, and a little track that went down to the outpost and then down into the wadi itself. And a goat herder, Adu, right, and 3 other Adu were bringing this herd of goats through, right, past our line for food and everything, right. And they engaged my blokes. My blokes were right, they were up in their little hill, you know. And they dropped one of these blokes, right, and I captured 2. And of course I went down and arranged for the prisoners and all the rest of it. And while I was there, I always carried a fork stick because I'm a diviner. Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Strange. And I said this roly-poly sort of stuff. I said, must be bloody water. Where's that bloody drinking from? And I reported it. About 4 months later, in rolls this bloody drilling rig from England, and they got the credit for finding the water. Yeah, it was, and my bunker, and you built up, you didn't build down,
Yep.
You built up with rocks, right? Was there, and my chopper pad was there, and then the edge of the cliff like that. So. And when the water came through, see, I was getting water from the bloody mainland. They were flying it up the line to me.
Yeah, right.
Now I've got bloody water, and mate, they want to take it down the line. So they had these big plastic burners, like 44-gallon drum, but they were plastic. So I cut the top out of one of them. Right, the CO was coming in, and I said, "Oh, get you bastard, Pommy." Right? And so when he's coming in, I'm in the burnmill of water, and I got the hose, and I'm putting this water over me, and he got up to the top. Where's Captain Pete? Where's the Captain Pete? And I said, "Oh, there, sir. How are you? Bloody colonials, bloody colonials." Yeah, well, everything was colonial. And shortly after that, I got an invitation to go down to the headquarters down on the beach near Salala, And we're down there, and the adjutant, who was an Australian, he said, you clean clothes and everything there, and in the shower, have yourself a shower, and the Land Rover will take you down to the meeting. And I said, oh, that sounds all right. What the hell's going on? They must have something planned, you know. And of course, what it is a line of hills like that, right? And then a line of hills along the coast. And there's this gap, right? And the camp used to be in here, and everything was out through the gap, and they get landing craft to unload some of the gear and everything. So I had me down in this Land Rover. I went, and away I went, and out through the what's name, and here it is. Here it is. You would not believe. A marquee was set up, bloody big tent, all the bell arrangements and everything. Women are walking around. The officers, senior officers' wives, major and above, were allowed to come to our man. Right? So they had this big party. The CO put on the party for the officers' wives on the beach, this tent. And I come home to meet the ladies, and I thought, well, I come all the way
For this.
For this.
Yeah, I stayed there for about half an hour, I suppose, putting up with all this crummy. And I ended up saying to the two I see, I've got to get back to the company. So I went back to the headquarters, back into the area, and I had the chopper was there, and I put in 2 bags of bloody dates. Live on dates, mate. Yeah. 2 bags of dates, and I put in 2 big bags of tinned fruit and everything, right, in the chopper. I said, where you going? I'm going out to my bloody company. Fuck you, bloody. So I'm here. I'm away. Away I went, and they never seen me again for another 2 months.
So for you, Keith, you come back from Oman, and in 1975, after 27 years of service, you leave the army. And how hard was it to transition from the army to civilian life?
It was quite easy. Quite easy. The army was being buggerised around. I won't mention the political scene in 1973, but I think a lot of people, if they got any brains, would know who was the Prime Minister at that time and who was making mess and who got tossed out of office and all the rest of it. But I'd sort of had enough. And I wasn't feeling the best. I had a bit of post-traumatic stress. And so I took up professional fishing, and believe me, I made more money out of fishing than I ever made out of the bloody army. And consequently, I had a good business running, and post-traumatic stress was hitting me a bit, and I went to the RSL, and I wasn't given a satisfactory welcome with the RSL, and so I pulled my own way through things by taking on contractual work for, I was doing home renovation and things like that. So it was a settling down period, right, till I sort of retired from civilian life. My retirement came because of what was happening to the veteran community. I was getting all sorts of people that needed assistance to become bloody TPIs, and it was this other government that stuffed it up, that the veterans weren't being looked after, and of course the leadership and running of the RSL had changed, and the veteran community wasn't being cared for like it was in the older days. So I had enough bloody work to do then, just looking after the veterans.
And that's a passion that you continue to do this day, and you are now alongside our great mate Rick Meehan, who is now taking that passion forward with the Keith Payne VC benefit group. Where did that passion come from? Was it from when you were leading your men that you leave no one behind, and even in the times of when they need support, you now take that up as what you've always done?
Well, as soon as I was approached, and that happened as a consequence of an invitation. Like, okay, I'm invited to Darwin for Anzac Day. I get to Darwin and bang, bang, bang. There's at least 4 veterans that have got body problems. And bang, on the phone I go, and it's surprising with the senior people in DVA at that time, I could get some bloody work done for the bloody veterans. Just by using the phone, without the bloody paperwork, most of the time it always involved the paperwork and everything else that goes along with it, but it became a passion, to make sure that the veteran, and some of them wouldn't know, and I'd say, "Are you all right, right?" What about, why didn't you see about so-and-so? Oh, no, what a bloody worry. Well, let's do it. Let's do it. And as a consequence, I think it was Rick that came along and came up with the idea of the group. I think it must have been because Rick knew that I'd been working with the veterans, and I was separated from the RSL as well, that I'd correspond with, and communicate with them on the matter. So that's how it all happened.
Yeah, right. And you do some amazing work, and Rick and the guys, and we had Digger Day yesterday, which was absolutely fantastic, and Digger Day is in its 14th year and going into its 15th year next year. For you continue to serve. You've left the army, but you continue to serve, which is something that you've always done. And looking back, with 27 years of service and continual service now, was joining the army still the best decision that you made, apart from marrying Flo?
Well, I think that's an odd question. In answer to that, I think it was probably I was born to be a soldier. And it was because of the uniforms during the war years, floating around the town, I became a uniform puppet. Yeah.
Yep. And in 2006 and 2015, you were awarded an OAM and a AM for the work that you do in the veteran space and the community. Looking back now, with that, proud moments for you for the work that you've done for veterans and the community?
Yeah, well, those awards came in unexpectedly. You do things that earn that, but you don't expect that.
Yes. Yep.
You know, you're just doing things, and then suddenly Peter Cosgrove comes up and says, "Come on, I want to see you." You know.
Absolutely, and for you now, what advice, looking back, the age you are now, the age that you've got to, looking back now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Would I give my 18-year-old self?
Yes.
Well, I think I would just tell my 18-year-old self to do what you've done and do it as best you can.
Good advice to any young person out there. And
Yep.
for you, Keith, what advice would you give any young person that is looking at joining the army or the defence force, or even being a first responder for service?
I think my senator one, care with your training and be a friendship to your service.
Beautiful. And for you now, I know that you're looking to retire and step away, which you did a long time ago, but you're still serving. Where would you like to see the work you do go forward into the future?
I'd like to see, Rick's not going to like this, I'd like to see the RSL go back to its old legs, right? When it used to look after the veterans, right? And it used to go to the government to look after the benefit of the veterans, instead of sitting on their bum and doing nothing, right? And just taking the money and inviting a veteran to the club to buy beer to enrich the RSL, and the RSL is not looking after the veteran community, which they should do.
Absolutely.
They should be taken off the list now, right?
Yep, that's what originally the RSL was set up for, you guys, the veterans.
Yeah, well, when I joined the RSL all those years ago, when I was a 20-year-old, right, they wanted to know if I needed any help or, but when you're that age and you're in the military and you say, well, I don't need any help, the army's looking after me, all right, but as the years roll by, there's always those things that the RSL should, and not only could, but should look after for the veteran community, right? And the individuals, from down in the sub-branch level, the individuality is look after the veteran in your little group, right? Like an army does with a section, a platoon, or anything else. But the RSL has forgotten it.
And it's sad, really is sad, that where the state of affairs are with the RSL. And we could go down a rabbit warren, but we won't. Keith, looking back now, going forward, what are your plans for the future? Obviously to retire, spend time with Flo, and enjoy life?
Yeah, well, I've been chasing the post-traumatic situation for 41 years since I lost my first mate to suicide from post-traumatic stress. And I asked myself then, why? What happened? Why did it happen? What is the government doing? And I learnt from the old system that because I was in North Queensland, isolated away from things down in the southern area, right, we found that they had these bloody lunatic asylums. And the World War One blokes just went into lunatic asylums and were forgotten. They were bloody well forgotten, and they were buried out there in that piece of dirt, and no record was made. And that to me that's simply not on. Not on to the veteran community, not on to those that were prepared to give their life for their country. And so with the increase over the years of hearing of more suicide and everything, I've been chasing post-traumatic stress and expressing it to government and everything for quite a number of years. In so much as that when the Ramsay group were taking over the repatriation hospitals throughout Australia, because the government couldn't afford the cost of making all of those new hospitals. The old hospitals were made back in 1914, and the white ants were in, and and it needed doing. So what the government of the day said, we will give you the land, right, you build the hospitals. So the Ramsay group agreed with that, and under their charter there were a couple of items missing on how the veteran was to be treated on arrival at the private hospital. How was he to be admitted in and everything else like that. And a few things had to be changed. So I formed in with Paul Ramsay, who was the president of the Ramsay Committee, Hospital Committee. And through the conversation of all these other things that were involved, I had mentioned post-traumatic stress, you see. And when things had come to a conclusion and everything, Paul invited me down to Sydney to his mansion overlooking the Sydney Harbour Bridge and what have you. And we had lunch. He then said to the young butler that he had, open the panels, and open it, and here was a panorama of Greenslopes Hospital. And he went through and explained to me why this was going to be built before that. Because I said, wait a minute, you got vets going into the old wards. And he said, Keith, try and think. You can't put veterans in there and have old surgeries. You've got to have new surgeries, and that comes last. They can still be looked after down in those old wards while all this was being built. And the first thing that had to be built was the headquarters. Right? And I thought, So he explained all this. And then he tapped up at this building, isolated up at the back of the whole complex. And he said, and this is the KPU. And I thought, that's nice. Have a building named after you, you know, that's nice. And of course, in those days, post-traumatic stress was not being mentioned anywhere or anyhow, right? But that was to be the veterans' wing, right? The Keith Payne unit was to be the veterans' wing. I visited there about almost a month ago, taken right through the hospital and given a rundown by the psychologists and everybody that are working at it. And it needs renovation. It needs extension. There's 27 vets there now with post-traumatic stress, 7 of whom are suicidal. Right? That's there now. Right? And I want an extension built to that to cover first responders, police, ambos, nurses, bloody cattlemen, anybody that's got post-traumatic stress in there, right? Initially, my big thing was to purchase a big lump of property, a small tourist resort on a lake, nice and quiet, beautiful bloody place for post-traumatic stress, and set up a hospice for post-traumatic stress. I initially applied for $11 million, purchased the land, set up the legals, get a good bloody manager into the first part of the thing. That's the renovation of the now holiday resort, right? So I could put veterans in straight away before the main hospital was built, right? And everything. But the government, well, one of the parties in the government said, yes, Keith, if we get back in office, you'll get it. Well, I didn't get back in office, so I didn't get it. Now, with the KPU in the condition that it's in, I have to go to a primary thing to get fixed before getting a big main thing done. So when I say I'm going into retirement, right, I will be cutting back on my travels and things like that, but I'll still be concentrating on veterans issues and things like that, though my eyesight doesn't allow me to read now, so I'll have to have a secretary alongside of me. And hopefully before I pass, something concrete has happened.
You continue to serve. You've basically, as you said, you've been a soldier your whole life, and now the work that you do, not only for veterans but first responders. As a first responder, thank you for including us as part alongside you guys. It really does mean a lot. It's been an absolute honour and a privilege to sit with you and record a snippet of your life. And if people want to read your full story, you do have a book. It is called Keith Payne VC, No Man Left Behind. People can read the full VC citation. They can read your whole life. But for me, and I want to thank you, Rick, as well, for being here with Keith today to record this. And, mate, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing this to happen, because it'll never happen again.
So, Keith Payne VC AM, thank you so much for coming on True Blue Conversations and sharing your story. It has been an absolute privilege. Thank you, mate. The Queen has been graciously pleased, on the advice of Her Majesty's Australian Ministers, to approve the award of the Victoria Cross to Warrant Officer Class 2 Keith Payne, Royal Australian Infantry Regiment. On the 24th of May 1969 in Kotum Province, Warrant Officer Payne was commanding the 212th Company of the 1st Mobile Strike Force Battalion when the battalion was attacked by North Vietnamese force of superior strength. The enemy isolated the two leading companies, one of which was Warrant Officer Payne, and with heavy mortar and rocket support assaulted their position from three directions simultaneously. Under this heavy attack, the Indigenous soldiers began to fall back. Directly exposing himself to enemy fire, Warrant Officer Payne, through his own efforts, temporarily held off the assaults by alternatively firing his weapon and running from position to position, collecting grenades and throwing them at the assaulting enemy. While doing this, he was wounded in the hands and arms. Despite his outstanding efforts, the Indigenous soldiers gave way under the enemy's increased pressure, and the battalion commander, together with several advisors and a few soldiers, withdrew, paying no attention to his wounds, and under extremely heavy enemy fire, Warrant Officer Payne covered this withdrawal by again throwing grenades and firing his own weapon at the enemy, who were attempting to follow up. Still under fire, he then ran across exposed ground to head off his own troops who were withdrawing in disorder. He successfully stopped them and organised the remnants of his and the 2nd Company into a temporary defensive perimeter by nightfall. Having achieved this, Warrant Officer Payne, of his own accord and at great personal risk, moved out of the perimeter into the darkness alone in an attempt to find the wounded and other Indigenous soldiers. Some had been left on the position and others were scattered in the area. Although the enemy were still occupying the previous position, Warrant Officer Payne, with complete disregard to his own life, crawled back onto it and extracted several wounded soldiers. He then continued to search the area in which the enemy were also moving and firing for some 3 hours. He finally collected 40 lost soldiers, some of whom had been wounded, and returned them with this group to the temporary defensive perimeter he had left. only to find that the remainder of the battalion had moved back. Undeterred by this setback, and personally assisting a seriously wounded American advisor, he led the group through the enemy to the safety of his battalion base. His sustained and heroic personal efforts in this action were outstanding and undoubtedly saved the lives of a large number of his Indigenous soldiers and several of his fellow advisors. Warrant Officer Payne's repeated acts of exceptional personal bravery and unselfish conduct in this operation were an inspiration to all Vietnamese, United States, and Australian soldiers who served with him. His conspicuous gallantry was in the highest traditions of the Australian Army.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.